Let's hear our scripture this morning from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do for us whatever we ask." "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." "You don't know what you are asking," Jesus said. "Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" "We can," they answered. Jesus said to them, "You will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared." When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." So these two, James and John, could they be any more audacious in this moment? Could you imagine demanding Jesus grant you what you ask? Clearly, even the disciples were a little shocked by it. And Jesus is cautious, responding to them. "All right, what do you want?" But then to even go on and ask to be at his right and left hand in glory. I mean, you want to ask them, have you listened to anything Jesus has said up to this point? Are you even listening? But it invites me to ask, what made them so bold in this moment to ask this question? So it made me go back and look at exactly who John and James are. We hear in the story they're brothers. They're the sons of Zebedee. They were in literally the very first group of disciples called by Jesus. So these two have been with him from the very beginning. Before there were 12, there were 3. There were the 2 of them, and then Peter was with them. They had all been fishermen together. Following a rabbi for the rest of their life had not been in their life plan. They had had a different plan for their lives. There's some traditions that suggest that Salome was their mother, who might have been Mary's sister, so potentially they could have been cousins with Jesus, potentially knowing him his whole life. We know they come from Capernaum, which is not that far from Nazareth, so even if they hadn't met him, they would have known of him for a long time. So it's fair to say they would have been some of the closest with Jesus. They were one of the 3 that were there for when Jairus' daughter was raised. They were some to witness the transfiguration. And after this story later, they will be among the 3 he asks to stay awake and pray with him in the Garden of Gethsemane. They're also known, not everybody gets a nickname. Peter gets Rock, and they get Sons of Thunder, which sounds like a Marvel movie title, but I think it has more to do with kind of how bold and brash they are, as we see in the conversation today. But also because he had to rebuke them. Their first response over being negatively or not accepted in a Samaritan town was to burn it down. Jesus suggested that was maybe not the right way to go. They also wanted to rebuke somebody who was trying to cast out demons in Jesus' name. So these are people he speaks honestly to, people who he speaks critically to, who don't always get everything right. But despite that, they stay with him, and he stays with them. They would have seen so much at this point, heard so many conversations and teachings and parables. They clearly didn't fully understand what was about to happen, but it made me wonder if instead of it being about their ego, what if their questions reflect the depth and the boldness of their faith? Now, I recognize that the author of Mark is not trying to lift these 2 up. That's not the goal of the story here. He is trying to show that they've missed some of the points that Jesus has been trying to make. But what I appreciate is their answer is as bold as their question. Can you drink the cup that I will drink? Will you be baptized with my baptism? And they say, yes, we can. I have to admire that kind of confidence, even if they really don't know what they're saying yes to at the moment. Because they trusted Jesus enough. They trusted the powers that he did have that they had seen for themselves. They believed this message of God's upside-down kingdom that he was proclaiming to them and to others. So it made me think, here's what I actually think they wanted. I don't think they just wanted to be great. I think they wanted to be great in the eyes of Jesus. I think they wanted to be great in this new kind of realm he was bringing about. And in that way, I think we are like them. I want my life as a Christian to be great in the eyes of God. Can I get an amen? Isn't that who we want it to be great in front of? I want my values to be like the values that Jesus taught, that he lived, that he revealed in his miracles. I want to be aligned with the people Jesus was aligned with. That's what it means to follow him. I want to be near Jesus in God's realm. Who wouldn't want that? And we want that because for some of us, we have also been with Jesus for a long time, maybe for our whole lives. We have also heard his words, listened to his teachings, been shaped by his miracles and his life and death and resurrection. Maybe some of us have known the healing that he can provide. Sometimes his words have comforted us. Other times they've challenged us. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be close to Jesus. So I think James and John invite us to also ask bold questions, asking how we can be full participants in this new thing that God is still doing. But the story also reminds us, if we're going to ask Jesus a serious question, we got to be ready for him to answer it. And often that is a hard answer. He makes clear right off that anybody who wants to be great or first in this new order, just like we heard a few weeks ago, you're going to have to become servants. It's almost like there's a theme in this book. Being first and great in the eyes of God is going to look like being humble and last in the eyes of this world. Jesus explains, yes, I'm the ruler, but I didn't come to be served. I'm going to rule by serving others. Unlike the Gentiles who want to lord their power and authority over everyone, he served. That's how people in God's realm are going to be great and going to act. And if we're going to be like him, we're supposed to do the same. And just when I think it can't get more audacious, Jesus answers them after they give their proclaim their yes we can. He affirms them. He says, you will drink this cup. You will be baptized in the same way. He affirms that James and John are both capable and able to do this thing he's asked them to do. These former fishermen, these sons of thunder, these ones who got parts wrong, including the question today, will stay faithful and they will keep following. And he says, you can and you will do this hard work that will be laid out in front of you. You will not be the same. You will become great in the eyes of God because you will become servants to all. So that's why in our series of holistic faith, serving or service is the second part. Last week we talked about fellowship as the entry point to a holistic or wholehearted faith that when we're in fellowship with each other and when we allow ourselves to fully participate in that, that we encounter Jesus is present among us and can be known through us and through other people. But this week, our focus is on serving, which we talked about a few weeks ago is essential to a life in the Spirit, and it produces the fruit of the Spirit. But we didn't talk about how that serving produces that fruit. And I want to be really clear, these 4 categories are not meant to be a checklist where, oh, I've checked that and I can go. I've done the thing, I've shown up, I've served God. Am I okay, God? Can I move on? But they are meant to be a place to check in with ourselves, with God, with our community. These are not transactions to turn into God for a report card. These actions are not transactional. We engage in these practices because we expect them to transform us. They're transformational. When I call us to serve, or God calls us to serve, it's not just the action, it's a calling to become servants. It isn't just an action we partake in, but it is something we become. It becomes our nature. Just as we cannot separate our lives and our freedom from anyone else, we cannot separate our lives from serving if we are following the one who came to serve. And this is the one scale of measurement I should strive for, right? Because so often we compare ourselves to things that are the wrong kind of scales, whether that's our jobs or our grades or our homes or our experiences or our parenting or our bodies or whatever. But as Christians, God looks upon our ability to serve, our willingness to serve, as Gary just mentioned, both in big and small ways. In the serving, that man was transformed in a way he didn't even know or expect to have happen. This looks different for different people. For that person, that small act made a huge difference. For other people who have had a lifetime of serving, it may look very different. But I think the audaciousness of their question and even the boldness of Jesus' answer invites us to ask ourselves, what are we willing to risk in order to not just be people who serve, because lots of people do that without religious associations, but what are we willing to risk to be servants of God? The one psalm that always catches me on this one or convicts me on this one that says, God says, do not give me offerings that cost you nothing. And I'm always like, I hear that. So what are we willing to change about ourselves or our lives in order to see real change in the world? And as we heard in our offering we do each week, it can be a variety of things. Is it our budgets, our schedules, our habits, or even our minds and hearts? I know several members of the families gave up time on Saturday yesterday to serve at the food pantry. I know there are others who are going to give up days of their time to go serve at the mission trip in Mayfield, Kentucky. I also know that we serve by listening humbly to people who know more about a situation or suffering than us and not be offended when they point out that maybe we're part of the problem. But the idea is that these acts that we participate help us see how everything else is connected, how we are connected to everyone else in our church, in our community, in our world. That's part of growing the servant's heart. That when I serve the group that serves at the pantry, how does that change how they look at hunger in every other place? When we go to Mayfield, how will that affect how we look at the weather and climate and how all these things are connected? The world's problems feel so big and overwhelming, and we think, what can I possibly do to solve it? And Jesus says, serve. Give yourself away. See them all as your brothers and sisters, worthy of your time and your gifts and your heart. The way people know, the way we serve is how people know we follow Jesus. He's the reason we make the sacrifices we make, why we align ourselves with the poor and the marginalized, why our idea of greatness and being first looks very different than the rest of the world. And today's story reminds us that we can do this risky, challenging kind of serving because no matter how audacious or bold or Sons of Thunder's James and John's question was for Jesus, from that moment on, they did it. They did drink the cup that he drank. They stayed with him to the end. And we know they were both in that upper room and following the ascension of Jesus. John was with Peter when the religious authorities confronted them after a healing. And John was present when his brother James was the first to be martyred for the faith. We know John was banished, according to legend, to the island of Patmos, and he died late in his life. But these two men, with the lives that they did lead, are some of the reason we now, all these years later, are here as followers of Jesus. They were transformed from being fishermen to being followers, to being apostles, to being servants of God that we speak of now. Much later, much farther away. As they were transformed, the world was also transformed. And they showed us, no matter what they thought they could do, Jesus knew what they were capable of. And even more boldly and audaciously, I say, he thinks the same thing of all of us.